All right, today we're going to be looking at aperture. Aperture is a pretty tricky thing for me to capture on what it does, but what I have is a camera and it's pointing at a head model, and the head model has a hippie poster in the back of it. So obviously, if this was real life, you would want the subject to be up front, not the hippie poster, okay? So we're going to look at what we have to do here. Now keep in mind, this is just a science project. It's not what you would use as far as taking portraiture shots. This is just about learning aperture. So we're going to pretend, and this is the easy way to pretend, the model cannot move. She's a model. She's a head on a stick, so she can't go anywhere. If she was moving, that would change everything. That would introduce motion to the scene. We don't want to do that as a science thing. All right. So what we're going to do here is we're going to look at, first, having this wide open. What does that mean? Having the aperture wide open. Right now, I look at this light meter and say, well, if it was wide open, I have to introduce a little bit more time here. And I'm going to go, because I don't have any flashes or anything, I'm going to go into the positive about halfway here. And then I'm going to realign my composition up. And then in Lightroom, we're going to take this shot. So let's go to Lightroom and take this shot. Okay, what do we get? Well, we get her in the scene, and we get the distracting background a little bit off to the side. I don't see it as much. I'm going to take one more shot, realign the composition up just a little bit. Something I can crop a little bit more. There we go. So distracting background is not part of the equation. Because why? Depth of field. So having a lower number there on my camera introduces this. See, notice the lens that it's completely extended out. Well, between the camera, her, and the background, there's probably roughly 5 feet between every object. 5 feet between the lens and her in the background. So introducing that much with a lower number on the aperture, which is a bigger hole, I can take advantage of depth. Therefore, it blurs the background. Any distracting things in the background of a portrait shot go away. All right, so let's reverse it. Let's say we up aperture the number, narrowing the camera hole all the way. Well, now we just have less light in the camera. And what happens? Well, my light meter goes crazy. It says, no, you don't have enough light. So I have to what? Increase time. So this is where it gets tricky, because if this was a real model and she moved it all, it would get blurry. Good thing she's doesn't have any legs. So here we go. Let's see what happens when we take the shot now that there is a smaller hole in the camera and more time involved. Lots of time here. I mean, look at that shutter's still open. Da, da, da. So lots of movement going on. She can tap dance. She would be all over the place by now. There we go. It finally released. Look at that. Okay, so now what happens? It became flat as flat can be. I can see some of the detail in the background, and I can see her, and I have a lot more light being calculated in the scene also, because the scene has been open for quite some time. So having a smaller hole is like being you in the desert. If there's a tree way off in the desert, what happens? Well, your eyes contract, okay, as far as your iris goes, it contracts, and you wince, okay? So those are two actions that allow me to see a very far distance in a great amount of light. Same with the camera. I'm narrowing the aperture hole, and then I'm wincing. So that allows me to see the light, see the background, see all the way back into the scene. All right, we're going to be looking at aperture more than this, but for right now, just know aperture affects depth, and it also affects how much light going into the camera. And then we'll look at what it means to have aperture in motion, which is kind of the same if you think about it. So if something is in motion, if we want to capture the entire scene, well, it's tricky. But we'll get into that in the next few videos. For right now, that's aperture. Enjoy.